we're broadcasting and we're back. I want to start. Oh, I want to remind me later on that. Still do that. I want to start this. And we're back. We are MAPD714 in the fall 2017 semester. We are week 9, part 1 of our broadcast, talk about navigation views for iOS 11. We're still using the book, beginning iOS iPhone development with Swift 4 now. That's the newest book that we're using. And we're going to start off by talking about, like I said, it's not Swift 4, it's Swift 3, Swift 4. That's the newest book. It's not just table views we're talking about navigation controllers. So that's kind of wrong too. All right, so I did talk about, for people who just came in, I did talk about the test, just to remind you, and I'm recording it for anyone who's missing today in class. There will be a test next week on during class time. It'll take the entire time of class. I'll give you 4 hours to build an application with a partner. So you pick a partner, we build an application out. It'll be probably worth 20% of your final grade, just FYI, right? And then we'll get back to doing assignments after that, right? It'll cover everything, all inclusive up to today, right? So that means that I'll ask you to build interfaces, views, navigation controllers, segues, we'll talk about today, lots of stuff. There will be a UI UX component because you're doing UI UX stuff with Genjo. That means you need to do a bit of a plan, put things together. You're nervous? Don't be nervous, right? And I fully expect it'll take you the full 4 hours. Okay, it's not going to be something that is going to take an hour to do or 2 hours, which means you'll have to be prepared to work that day. It's not going to be increasingly that hard because I'm not going to make an application we're going to put on the App Store, right? That's going to be unique and it's going to make you $1 million. It's going to be something you've probably seen before. That's doable within the time period. Okay, so something that we can do. That means I'm restricted in using. I can't use many different APIs because I haven't shown you the API. And if I give you something that you haven't seen, I may give you a starter application, something that I give you and say, "Here's your start. Now go." Right? I may do that. It depends on what I decide to get you to do. And if I give you something to start, that means what I'll probably do is build up the entire application first and then strip it back. I'll take everything out, right? And leave the pieces empty inside. And you just go in and do what you have to do. Might be the way I do it. Or I just say, just go do it on your own from scratch. And if I do that, that means there'll be less scope and, for you to do. All right, so today we're talking about navigation controllers, right? And that's a little different. We're going to pull up our Xcode. Again, we're working with Xcode. And when we pull it up, notice that, not just single view application, but we also have master detail app and other kinds of things. We're not going to use this today. We could, but we're going to start off just like it in the book with a single view app and build up from scratch. This is really great because, again, you get the bones of what everything is. So when you see a more complex type of app, then you're good, right? You understand it. You look at it and go, okay, I understand the pieces because we've done this before a bunch of times. Right? So we're not skipping anything. We're going through everything in order. So this should give you enough to get going. All right. So if I click next, again, I'm going to call this thing MAPD 714, and it's the fall 2017 semester. Oops. And it's lesson 9. But what this is all about is fonts. I'll talk about what this is. So again, it's Swift, of course. Nothing else here. Checked and click next. I'm definitely going to create a Git repository here because I'm going to put this up on GitHub, right? And click create. And we have our basic app starting off, right? One thing I want to change this display name. And if you notice, it says here, we're going to make this app. This is up on eCentennial for you guys to get it. We're going to talk about how to make multiple sections within a table view. And that's just using, we talked about this last time, actually. We talked about this idea of a custom cell for tables. We're going to see that today, right? Remember I said we're not going to handle it last week. We're going to handle it this week because this week we do it anyway. Custom tables, custom cells. We're going to talk about how to do that. How to edit, how to delete, how to reorder, all that stuff we should probably mostly be able to handle today, I believe, within our app, right? And what we want to do is we want to create this idea of a hierarchical application where you have our main root controller, and then from there you have a bunch of subviews, subcontrollers, right? That's why it's difficult today to do, because there's lots of chances that it's going to mess up, okay? This idea of a stack, and think about a stack for people who haven't done programming, stack programming and stuff like that, or thinking about it. There's a difference between the heap and the stack. What's the difference between a heap and a stack? Anybody? Stack has a seek, okay. Heap, what's the heap? A heap of stuff, right? Yeah, all of that. But what's the difference in programming, right? In programming, there's a difference between a heap and a stack, right? It's not just a stack that has a sequence. Say that again? Value and reference type? No, that's not right. But it's like this. It's like when you have a stack, if I have a function call, right? If I do a function call, the function call gets pushed onto the stack, right? And then when I'm done the function, it gets popped off the stack. That's how the control flow works, right? So we use stacks all the time. And on the heap, we allocate memory, right? A lot of times. So let's say, for example, I want to create a new class in other languages. I might use the new keyword, right? When I use that new keyword, it instantiates the idea of creating an instance. That instantiation happens on the heap, right? Okay, on the stack, anything that happens in that call, if I have a method call, I do some variables, I pop that onto the stack, and then when I'm done doing that stuff, it pops off the stack, right? And the way we get Stack Overflow is if I do something like a recursive call, keeps on recursing, it keeps popping stuff onto the stack until there's no more room, and then our application finishes, right? Woo, it's done, dead, and then we have some kind of memory leak or whatever, right? So stacks, stack management and all that stuff is really low level for us. We don't do that here in iOS. That's more of a C++, C thing. Reference counting, it does all those kind of things for us. Safe pointers, we don't have to worry about those things, right? In other languages like C#, same thing. Java, same thing, everything's okay. But in lower languages like C++ and C, yeah, you have to manage all the memory yourself, and we have to watch the stack and the heap. But that's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about a stack of views. So I have a bunch of views. I have the main view, and then I add something onto the stack. I push something on top of the stack, the next view. And when I'm done with that view, I pop it off the stack, and I'm back to the other view. And that's how this stuff works. So it's in your book. It talks about it a little bit more. But I wanted to talk about that because without understanding of stack and subcontrollers and so on, you may not understand what that is. So what we're building today, and this is something that's neat, we're building this idea of, a controller that has some additional features, right? We just go to it. You're going to think about an application where you have some kind of, let me see if I can zoom in here, some kind of list, and you have these little arrows, okay? So those little arrows allow you to go to the next view, right? But what you're doing when you click those arrows, or sometimes even press on the cell itself, is what you're doing is you're popping a new view onto the stack, this idea of the stack. Then you go to, it shows you the next view. And when you're done, it takes you back here again to the original list, right? So when you pop the new view off the stack, so you push a view and then you pop a view. That's what happens, right? And we do that through segues, right? We talked about segues very briefly last week, where you can have a transition. That's what a segue is, between one view and another. That's all it is. And you can regulate how that transition looks. You can say, I want to make a transition that shows the view coming from the bottom, right? Or I want to make a transition that shows the view coming from the right, right? You see these things in applications today, right? And that's a segue. Apple calls it a segue. It's a fancy word. It's from film, where we move from one scene to another scene. A segue, right? A bridge, a transition, call it what you like, right? And we can make it animated. We can make it just slide in. We can make it do all kinds of stuff. And that's the great thing about what we're doing. So that's what this application we're going to build is. It's going to be a fonts application where we kind of show a list of fonts, and we pick our favorite fonts. And it holds our favorite fonts in something called a user preference. It's like a file that gets stored onto your iOS device. Actually, it is a file, right? So this will be the first type of persistent storage for you guys. You never had persistent storage up until today, week 9, right? Why? Because there's so much to learn. Persistent storage, whew, that's even more difficult. And we're going to use Objective-C classes for things like SQLite and those kind of things, which you need to learn. Those are basics. but it's going to build up. We're going to do that near the end. So yeah, so that's what you're building. You're building this thing where you have this view that's going to come up, and it's in your PowerPoint if you follow the what I'm talking about now. But that's really what it is. The idea that you have this disclosure indicator, that little arrow. There's two types of indicators, and they're kind of made up of these accessory icons. That's what they're called. So the little arrow is an accessory icon, and you can decide what kind of accessory icon you show on the right side of your table, right? Depending on the accessory icon you show, you're going to basically tell the user, hey, you know what? If I have this eye accessory icon, right? That's going to tell us that, you know, we're going to need to have a detailed disclosure. That's the kind of icon we're going to put in there. A detailed disclosure. If you click there or press on with your finger, it's going to give you information, right? And then it's different than the disclosure indicator that actually opens up the next view. All right. So there's differences between one and the other. And they give you some best practices too. All right. You know, about how to use stuff. So if you tap the info button, right, it should allow the user to view and maybe edit some more detailed view, right? You know, but if you press the right arrow, that should tell you that you're going to go deeper into some other navigation. You're going to kind of get more detail about something, but not necessarily edit what you're doing, right? So a different kind of style of doing things. So different kinds of what they call disclosure indicators. That's what they're called, okay? Really an accessory icon that's inside of your row. So you have a font, you click info, you can edit the font, maybe the font size and so on. And then the next one would actually get you to add the font to your favorites. That's what this greater than sign would be, right? Or the arrow. So different kinds of ways of doing things. And then you can see here that this would be, you know, what you're doing here in your, when you click the info, right? I guess, like it says, touching any row of the table brings you to this child view. And when the child view, it shows you the different, the actual font and it's all of its glory. So basically it shows you like how it's going to look at different font sizes, 9 point, 10 point, 11 point, and so on. As an example, this is the example of font. And then you click back or press back, and it takes you back. So in general, and this is right from the book, it tells you, you know, to offer a single choice row tab, right? That's all you have to do. You don't have to have any disclosure icons because you're only offering a single choice. You're only going to one other screen, right? If you're going to have some kind of right pointing arrow, then the row tab will take you to some more items, something else. It's not a detailed view, but it gives you some. It's still a single choice, but gives you some other detail about or other things you can do with that selection. And then if you want to offer two choices, let's say, for example, you have either a detailed disclosure indicator or a detail button. And then this basically tells the user that there's going to be more stuff. You're going to edit, you're going to add more details, all that kind of stuff. That's just kind of a standard that Apple recommends. Okay, that's what they talk about here, how to set this stuff up and why would you use it. So for next week's test, if I ask you to do something, you may have to choose the appropriate indicator, which I'll probably tell you what to do. Anyway. And then you kind of come down into your subcontroller, which actually shows you kind of a sample of your font, what it's going to look like, and then allows you to either include in your favorites and change the font size from a testing perspective. That's what it's going to do. So when we build this last view, there's several views. Obviously, you see there's like a lot of little views we're going to have to build over today. And I'm going to give some of this I'm going to build with you. And just as a preparation for next week, I'm going to get you to build some of it yourself, right? As a little pre-test test to see if you guys can do it, right? So we're going to take it to some point. I'm not going to talk the whole time because that's going to be really boring. You know, watch me code. Haha, no. We're going to do it together. And it's good that you try and do it on your own. So we're going to take it to a certain point where everything is ready to go. And then I'm going to say, go. And you and a partner are going to get together and try it out. And then what I may do today, depending on where everyone sits in terms of getting it done, I may let you submit this thing as a lab mark for maybe 1 or 2%. Okay, so this one I'm letting you know. Yeah. I know. I told you it's a kind of crazy day to keep you on your toes and challenge you a little bit, right? Different than Victor's test, right? So that way it shouldn't be so bad. All right, so Yeah, so not too crazy. And you can also have the book. You have the book so you can follow along there as well. If you can remember, these are just excerpts from the book that we're using. And then, but I want to talk about some of the details because some of the stuff you may have never seen before. And so I'm just going to highlight that when we start off, I'll highlight how to do it, how to start off, and then you're just repeating some of the stuff, some of the steps later on. And that's what I want you to finish. So please, it might be a good idea to work with one other person, at least next to them, when you do this. And when you submit, I'll give you a little Dropbox to submit your stuff today, if we're going to do that. And then, you know, one of you just has to submit for 2 people. All right, so it's not so crazy. Questions so far? Yay, no questions. I'm not going to even listen to your questions anyway. No, I'm joking. Let's go. So we're going to go to the next part. So like they say here, and I'm zoomed in so you guys can see what they say, so it's not too small, because there's a lot of detail on these slides. And normally I don't make my slides so crazy. I hate that. But we have to talk about this a little bit. So again, we said Xcode gives us this template, but you know, in the book it says, hey, don't use a template, write it from scratch. And that's what we're going to do today, right? And so we're going to use the single view application, which we just made, right? We're going to make fonts as the product name, and we're going to do that here in the display name. Now you could also have done it somewhere else. That's one thing we're going to change, right? And when we set up our initial structure for the application, then I'm going to put it up on GitHub. So you'll have it up on GitHub. You can always download my version if yours didn't work somehow, or you couldn't get going, or I'm too fast, and then you can move from there. Okay. All right. So that's the first part. And then what we want to try and do is we want to erase some of our basic stuff, right? We've always up to date now. We've built these UI table view controllers. We've done UI view controllers. That's what we've done, basic stuff. Today, we're going to build this new UI navigation controller, and we're going to drag and drop it from the object library. All right. But in order for it to do that, we're going to go to the storyboard and delete what's already there. Okay. So remember, we're starting from scratch. Here we go. So we're going to go to here. Please follow along. Here's my main storyboard. I'm going to kill this thing, right? And the way to do that is go up here to view controller scene and press delete. And now you have nothing. Right? Don't be afraid. It's not bad, right? We've done this before. On the right, you're going to see this navigation controller inside of your object library. And we're going to drag and drop from the navigation controller, which is actually going to show us 2 controllers like this, right? We're going to drag and drop and let it go. Okay, that's the second part. Now we need to make our root controller one of these things, right? We need to make the entry point. Notice that right now there's no arrow here, right? So this thing here in our navigation controller scene, we want to make this the entry point, right? And if you notice on the right-hand side, you can do that initial view controller, but let's follow what it says to be sure. So again, we've erased everything. We've done all this stuff. We've dragged and dropped UI navigation controller into the scene, right? You get 2 scenes instead. And then on the left is the one we want to click, and we want to make sure that it's the initial view controller, or else you won't see that little entry arrow that goes right here, right? So we want to click down here. So it's inside of my attribute inspector up here. You click this if you don't have it already clicked, and go down here where it says is initial view controller and click that checkbox. And now you're going to see this little arrow. Without this, won't start. You won't know what to do, right? So you need to put that into place. The other thing, notice that there's this little round thing over here. That's the segue we talked about, right? And we're going to programmatically modify this, right? That's in code. And what you can do with the segue, if I want to, I can decide how to move transition from this, right, into this root controller. This is what this is, this root controller. Notice we have one prototype cell. Remember I talked about custom cells? Oh, today we're going to do custom cells. And up here where it says prototype cells, we're going to make another one eventually. Okay, not right now, but we're going to do that. But first, what it's asking you to do is in where the title of root controller is, we want to click it in the document outline and change it to say font as well as in the attributes inspector. So let's do that. So we're going to go in the document outline right here where it says root view controller, right? And if I double click, if I try and change this in the, like on the top, so if I kind of double click in here or whatever, or in my, in here in my attributes inspector, right? Which is, I'll be okay here in my view controller title. If I say fonts, that's in the root view controller, this one up here, not the one we touched before. That's the one on the right. This one. Right? So I changed this one to fonts. Okay. And then there is the title. That's that title. But if you notice, if I go here, if I actually click on the root view controller here, this part, the root view controller in here still shows root view controller, which is pretty ugly. So let's change that title from root view controller, right, to fonts. Right, there we go. So that's done. Save, run. Right? It should run, even though it won't do anything right now. Right? And oh yeah, one thing to do. Please don't run it in iPhone 8 Plus like I just did, crazily. Right? I don't want this iPhone 8 Plus. I want the iPhone 8, please. Right? So I want to kind of target iPhone 8, so we're on the same window. If you're an older Xcode user, iPhone 7. I'll use this when I'm here. Somehow I remember, I don't know. All right, so you should be able to run this thing now. If I run it, so I'm going to run it again. So it's an iPhone 8. It should bring up my simulator for iPhone 8, right? And you should see when it comes up just a bunch of tables that's empty. That's what you should see right now. Because we haven't programmed anything, and you can't get to the other views. Even though they're there, you can't get there. Oh, you're a shooter. You're going to buy one. All right. Ooh. Yeah, I know, it's awesome. That's good. All right, so yeah. So we've got this going on. We've got this this stuff. This is the first part. Going back to the PowerPoint, if you follow along, right? What we've got down right now is we've got this navigation bar right now, and in the attributes inspector we've changed everything, but there's no code or anything like that to do anything. We just got this thing called the application skeleton. That's all we've got right now. All right, and like it says, no rows will display. This is a great place to stop temporarily after we've run it. So we're going to stop our application. I'm going to go into my source control tab in here. Where's my source control tab? Notice that there are some branches and remotes. And what I want to do here, and again, it may look different on older version of Xcode, but what I want to do here is I want to add an existing remote, right? You can also do, see where it says create remote on GitHub? You can do both, right? If I do this on GitHub, it'll try and log me in as me, right? It'll also ask me for where am I going? I want to go to this one, so it'll kind of do everything for me, right? Which is kind of cool. For you, you can also do this, or you can do it remotely if there's already an existing remote. All right. So this is the lesson that's going to be called. I'm going to make it public. The remote name is going to be called Origin, right? And I'm going to click Create. Now this is great from a Xcode 9 perspective. That's really cool because you know what? That before it was much more complex, and so they've really done some really good integration into the next Xcode. What does this mean? What did I do? Well, if you notice, if I go back up to GitHub, and if I look at Centennial, then you should see at the top of the list my latest version, MAPD714 F2017 less than 9, right? This stuff that I just did with my project. It's pretty empty. It's just my application skeleton. That's all it is. And I've logged in and I've done it. So from here on in, if you fall behind, please take a look at this. I'm sure you'll be okay. But if you need to, you can always download this and use this as your starter as opposed to using your own for whatever reason. Okay, cool. So we've got that done. We're up on GitHub already. And I want to go back to the PowerPoint just to get you to the point where we're going to stop, right? All right, so what we want to do is we want to set up this idea of a list of favorite fonts, but we want this to persist. So we don't want this to disappear from one load to the next. Every time you load the application the first time, you should be able to see a list of your favorite fonts. And to do this, we're going to use this idea of user preferences, right? which is kind of like a plist file. That's what it is, a preference list, right? And this plist file is going to be stored as a file on your app, on your device, right? Now we kind of did this last one time, but this is because we read from it. We were able to read from it in one of our lessons, but this is where we're actually going to write to it for the first time, kind of. All right, so what we want to do is we want to create this idea for how to track our favorites, and this is where we're going to do this together. We're going to create a new Swift file, only a Swift file, called favoritesList.swift. Okay, so we're going to go into, on the right, inside of our application navigator over here, the project navigator, inside of this filter, this folder, right? We're going to right click and we're going to go new file. We're not going to use the Cocoa Touch class. That would be if I wanted to add in some kind of view controller, right? I wanted to add in a Swift file instead, this one, Swift file with the red bird, right? And click next. Okay, we need to name this Swift file, and what it's asking us to do is call it favoritesList.swift. So I'll do that. So favorites, I'm going to spell it the Canadian way, favorites list, right? And it's going to be saved inside of our application folder. I'm going to click create. Please keep that in mind because I've changed it to favorites list. I've got to be careful when I access it. I don't care about this stuff. I'm just going to take it away for now because not that I don't care about it, just I want to make it clean. I'm importing foundation. On the next slide, it should tell you the header of our favorites. Now notice there's foundation. We're going to keep that because that's the foundation library for Swift. And we're going to import our UI kit. So that's the next one. So we're going to import UI kit. And we're going to create a favorites list class. We're going to say class, right? And we're going to make it the same name. So I'm going to say favorites list, right? So that's the first kind of full class we're going to do like this. Now remember, a class has a constructor in most object-oriented languages. And in Swift, just as a reminder, our constructor is init. It's the init function. It's only one of them. Unless you overload it, you can have multiple constructors like other languages. But for us, we're going to only make one, right? And we're going to start off with making a couple of variables. One of them is this static constant. Okay, well, we'll talk about this in a second. So I'm going to say static let. There's a static let, static constant, which is going to be called shared favorites list. I'm going to spell it in the Canadian way, not the American way. So shared favorites list, right? That's what the constant's going to be called. And it's going to be equal to the favorites list, right? It's almost like I'm creating an object of this class. That's what this static thing is. Why am I doing this? Why would I do this, right? Well, when we do this, this variable, because it's static, what's a static variable do in other languages? Can someone recall what it does? What's the difference between a static and a non-static variable? Can't change. Constant can't change, but what's static do, right? You can change it as many times as you want. That's not correct. But we're using it as a you won't change the value. Well, in this case, it's let, so you won't change the value, right? The class name, you don't have to instantiate a member of the class. That's one thing that's important, right? So it's like a container. I know, it's funny, but it's like a container that basically allows us to use this call, right, if we wanted to. Normally, if it was public, this is not public static. It's only static, which means it's private by default, right? So it's because it's not public static, what we're doing here is actually creating something called a singleton, right? It's a singleton design pattern because we don't want more than one of these ever to be created. We only want to have one favorites list, right? And that's what the singleton pattern does. It forces us to only have one and only one ever. Even if I call this class again for whatever reason, I'm only still going to have only one, which means it's going to have a pointer to the memory location for this object. That's what it's doing, right? So whenever I do a static constant like this, and I point it to this object, which I haven't created, this new object is just going to be the same object as the other one, right? So it doesn't matter how many times I call this one, it's still going to refer to the same object. That's what it is, okay? That's important to understand. Next, this is new. Private set var favorites string. Okay, so what's this? So private var, and then inside the var, well, private set. So private set, and then var. That's a new piece of, they call it favorites again, not the American spelling, and then it's of type string. Okay, I'm explicitly typing this one. Okay, so why this? Don't worry about these warnings right now. Why this that I'm getting, right? Why am I doing this way? I'm doing it this way because when I use the set keyword, I'm allowing you to read the variable locally, but you can't change it. Okay, that's what you can do. You can reference it, but you can't change it. It's like a getter, actually, more than anything else, right? But it's inside the class itself because it's private, all right? Favorites string, it's an array of strings. That's what I'm doing. So I have an array of string. What is that? Our favorite fonts. That's what it's going to be, right? So that's what this is going to represent, this favorites thing, okay? All right, next, there's the initializer in it. So we're going to, in for our constructor. So this is our constructor, just to understand what it looks like. We don't put the word constructor or func in there, just a reminder, we put init, right? And inside of our empty initializer, this is our default initializer that we are replacing. We must put in some kind of data. And here's something different we've never seen before. We're going to create another constant called defaults. I'm going to zoom in here so you guys can see this a little better. Right? Here's a constant called defaults, a let variable. And now, for the first time, we're using this foundation class, that's what it is, called user defaults.standard. Okay? So again, let defaults is equal to a user defaults, right? Dot, and again, there's different ones. We want to use standard. Don't worry about the warnings again, right? That's important to do, right? So again, what we're saying is, hey, we want to store our stuff somewhere, okay? We want to start, this is the defaults, is setting up our user defaults. Remember I talked about user preferences, right? This is setting this thing up for us. That's what it's doing, okay? So we're starting it off. Now the next part is our stored favorites, right? That's what it's going to be called. So let's try this out. So let stored, again, Canadian spelling. Stored favorites is equal to the default object, right? For the key favorites, we're going to use Canadian spelling as a string. All right, that's what we're doing. We're casting it as a string, okay? Because we're saying that their stored favorites is a string array, right? So again, it's the defaults object, defaults.object. For key, we're going to call this favorites, lowercase, in the Canadian spelling, right? For key as, again, as with a question mark, string, because we are implicitly unwrapping. Okay? Make sure I've got it all right. So again, stored favorites object that's going to store everything, our storage object, which is our user default. It's going to create a file inside of our application where we're going to store, and inside of our device. And by the way, a lot of people use this method when we want to store some simple stuff. Not a big database. It's just a flat file, right? There's no functionality. You can read and store for it, and it's very common, right? And actually, you have the same thing in Android, yeah? Same idea, right? So this is the same thing that we're doing here in iOS. So this is the first part. Next, once we've done that, we want to basically say that our favorites, right, the one we called favorites, which we defined up here. So our favorites array is equal to something called stored favorites, which we just defined, right? And we're using this, we're going to go back to the Ukrainian again, ternary operator, right? Ternary operator, where we're checking, we're saying, hey, if our stored favorites are not equal to nil, then great. Make stored favorites, open up stored favorites and make favorites equal to stored favorites explicitly, right? Otherwise, create an empty array. All right, so for the first time, it's going to make an empty array because we don't have anything in stored favorites. But after that, it's going to open up the file. That's what it's going to do. All right. So let's go back there. So we're going to say that. We're going to go to favorites. Remember, we spelled it the Canadian way. Favorites is equal to, again, we want to say stored favorites. But we're going to kind of say if it's not equal to nil, right? So if stored favorites is not equal to nil, then this is the then part. This is the conditional statement here, right? And then we ask, okay, if it's true, do this. Then it's going to be equal to stored favorites. And we're going to explicitly unwrap it this time. That's what the exclamation mark means. Or open up an empty array for me, please. That's what it's going to do. Remember, we're going to allocate space for an empty array. We don't have a size. We just know it's a string array. And again, unless we're using an MS mutable array, did I make a mistake? I did. The great thing about IDEs in general, they help you out, right? This is good. So this is the first part in the initializer. So initializer, we've got some variables. So these are our variables. And you can say these are our private instance members or variables. That's what these are. This is the constructor of the class, right? And now we're going to add in the next part. Okay, so cool. We have another method called add favorite, where I take the font name, whatever that is. It's going to be a type string. And if our favorites contains, this is interesting, I'm checking to see if the favorite already contains the font name. If it doesn't contain, that's what the not equals. So it's kind of say if it doesn't contain the font name, then add it on, right? Otherwise, don't do anything, right? There's no need for an else, because if it doesn't pass this test, it doesn't do anything. This add favorite won't do anything anymore. So we're going to put that in. So we're going to say func, right? And normally in other languages, I use a capital A, but in Swift, we use the lowercase a. So add favorite, again, using the Canadian spelling. Okay, and it's going to be of type. There's going to be a font name. That's what it's going to be called. Font name. It's going to be of type string, right? And inside there, we're going to say if the favorites array. So if not favorites, that's kind of a weird way to do it. Contains that string element, which is going to be font name. And do we want to add or save our array? So we're going to append favorites.append, which is the actual font name itself. We're going to append it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to save favorites, which is another method we haven't defined yet. So save favorites. Okay, so that's why it's going to give us a bit of an error for now, because there is no save favorites. So what this does is this method adds a font to the user preferences. All right, that's what it does. Okay, it stores it inside that array, right? And of course, save favorites doesn't exist because we haven't defined it yet. Okay, so let's go to the next one. We're going to kind of go down. And of course, we're probably going to have to make a function called save favorites, right? Again, I'm spelling it the Canadian way, right? Notice it doesn't take any kind of parameters, because this one doesn't take a parameter at all, right? Right here. And if you look at the next slide, save favorites, here it is. Well, actually, there's remove favorite too, and save. Let's do save favorites first. Doesn't matter the order. And remove favorites afterwards. Okay, we'll do this one first, just to be a little different than the PowerPoint. Why not, right? So we're going to say defaults is equal to user default. So we're going to get a reference to the user preferences object again. So let defaults is equal to user defaults .standard. So we're going to create an object again. And what this does, just to let you know, it doesn't instantiate it yet. What it does is it gets a reference to the object, right? So we have an object that gets the shape of the object, whatever that shape is. But we haven't done anything to it yet. We're just preparing again, right? That's what this does. This is a preparation step. And then what it's going to do is it's going to set the defaults inside the favorite arrays for key favorites. That's where we're going to start setting up that particular because inside of a user preferences list, there's a big, it's almost like XML. It's almost like XML, where we set the key for the XML a component or the XML portion or set or area, block, whatever you want to call it. We're looking for favorites. That's what we're going to call it in that particular list. And then we're going to call synchronize. And what synchronize is going to do is it's going to take whatever we have and store it inside of there, right? So again, defaults.set. And then notice that there is the name of my collection. So this is called favorites with the Canadian spelling. And then we're searching for key. Here's key. And then inside key, we're going to put in favorites, right? So key, I'll be okay. And then inside, where we called it favorites earlier, that's what this is up here. This is the key, right? And we're just setting the favorites array to this favorites block inside of our defaults file. That's what we're doing there, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to synchronize, which actually does the saving. It's almost like a flush for people who remember other languages. We flush the buffer. Oh yeah, old school. And we synchronize. And synchronizing actually flushes the buffer. We have a buffer of data. We flush the buffer and we send it to the file. Okay. So this method saves. This method saves font favorites to the user preferences file. Kind of same as this one, but this one adds it, and this actually calls the save favorites right here, which actually does this. We probably could have called it the same way, but I think they broke it off into a different methods just in case. All right, cool. And notice that one thing we missed is this is a private method, right? The save favorites, right? And that's different from add favorites. So this is private. Okay, so that's the modifier, the access modifier. It means it will not be available outside of this class. That's why it's called from in here, right? Typically in other languages, I would add in underscore to the private. Other people may also use, you may see some other languages use m underscore, member underscore, and whatever it's called for member variables, or just underscore for private. That's what it means. And usually we also add the underscore for private methods as well, or functions. In Swift, they don't. Now we want to make this remove favorite. So we'll do that, and we'll add it underneath. Doesn't matter the order. I'm going to prove that to you. So func remove favorite. This does favorite. And inside here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say if. Okay, so when we have if let, this is kind of like, you know, we're checking to see if this constant index is interesting. Our favorites.index of font name, what does this do? There's our font name. So we're going to say our font name, which is of type string. Okay. And then we're going to do an if let. What's the difference between an if let and an if? So if let index, and then equal to favorites.index. Come on, I want you to understand what this does. So what do you think this does? It's a guard, right? It's a type guard. That's what this is doing, right? It's checking to see, it's almost like a error checking beforehand. Can we do it? Can we make our favorites.index, does it work, right? Why? Because sometimes we try and remove something. If it doesn't exist, how about I make a proper name, Tom? If it doesn't exist, it's going to fail, right? So it's checking here. It's guarding. It's checking to see if, can I assign favorites.index of font name, right, to the index that we just set up. Can we do this? If this is empty, it will fail, right? So that's what it's checking to see if it's possible. It's almost like try catch, only one part of it, right? It's interesting. And then Swift offers this kind of syntax to help us troubleshoot. All right, and if we can, we're going to remove favorites.remove at the index that we specified. Whatever the index is, we're going to get the index of the font name. It's going to search the array for this particular font name. If it finds it, right, it's going to set the index to that, whatever the index of the font it found, and then it's going to remove at that index. That's what it's doing. So favorites, and remove index, which we just defined. Okay, so it's going to remove the object that we find if it's found. If it's not found, it's going to skip through this anyway, right? It's going to ignore this. And then this is the reason why we call save favorites twice. Instead of doing the save favorites function over and over again, they made this function so that you can reuse it, right? Why? Because we're synchronizing again. Any changes we make, we added, we saved, right? Or we removed. This is what it's going to do. It's going to update our favorites, our default preferences or user preference. Is going to update that file, but we need to do a synchronize every time we want to do a change, just like we do in other languages, right? Where we flush the buffer again. That's what we're doing. You guys know what that means. All right, so this method removes a favorite from the user preferences file. That's what this does. That's this little class. That's what this thing does, right? We add, we save, and remove. The save function is a utility method that we call. It's private, and we call it from both the add, which is this one, and the remove. There's that whole list right there. So you can see it. If you miss something, you can see it right there. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. It's not like rocket science. If you've ever done a class before, for people who've never done object-oriented programming or who haven't had a lot of experience, this might be new to you. But really what we're defining is a bunch of methods, a few methods that we can use to add and remove. And why do we really have to do it here? Do I have to make a class? Probably not. I could probably make this happen other files, right? But we're probably going to reuse these methods over and over again. And so there's a good case for the class, right? If the methods, we're never going to reuse these methods, we only had one other details view, maybe there wouldn't be need for a class, but we're going to have many views here, right? And so because we have these many views, we might use these methods to adjust the contents of our favorites list. Okay, cool. So this is done. Let us continue. So we've got this part done. All right, and now we want to link it up. So we made our class. This is good, right? We declared this class property called shared favorites list. It's not exactly this, but it's the Canadian spelling. And again, like it says, it returns an instance of the class, right? We created this singleton idea that we talked about, and then we declared a property afterwards. It also talks about this. I put it in here. I don't have to normally from the book. I mean, it's self-explanatory for some, but if you've never seen this before, this qualifier, it means that the array can be read by code outside the class, but only, so that's what the set modifier does. It's a setter, right? But only code in the class implementation can modify it. That means you can do this. So favorites is equal to favorite list dot shared favorite list dot favorites. Whoo, crazy, right? It's a big long thing. I probably wouldn't write it this way if it was me. I'm just using the book, and this is read access is okay. But if you tried to write it, if you said like, favorites list that shared favorites list is equal to something else, it would fail, right? It wouldn't allow you to do that, and that's why it's kind of like a guard-proof way of doing it. All right, and again, our user defaults object, like we said, is this idea of a persistent dictionary, right? So it's like a map file, key value pairs, right? And that's what we're saving. All right, so we want to make this root controller. I'm probably going to stop soon because I want you to do the rest of it. Do this this new view controller because we've got the root view controller that we need to create. But guess what? We have a view controller instead, and we don't want the view controller. We need something else. So we're going to create a new. I'm just going to go back to this, and this is where we're going to probably stop for you guys. I'll let you guys do the rest once we start getting it going. Notice we have a view controller.swift file. This is pretty useless. We're going to delete it. So we're going to right click here and delete it. delete. And we're going to move to trash. Bye-bye. Okay, good. This is okay. Now it's a good time to put it up to GitHub. So I'm going to go to our source control here. And I want to make a new commit. Now, I want to push this up here. Can I do it here, or should I do it through source control? What do you think? We've done it lots of times. Source control. If I go click commit up here, I want to say added, you know, it's, what did we add? We added this stuff here. It tells you right here, our favorites list.swift file, right? So favorites list.swift, and we'll call this utility class. Utility class. We also want to push the remote, so I'm clicking this little button on the right here. At the same time that I'm committing, I'm also pushing, and I'm committing these 5 files that we changed. Notice that we modified our info.p list. We'll take a look at that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to click commit files and push, right? And we're good to go. Back to the navigator. I have my info.p list, right? And we modified this thing because we changed our bundle display name. We changed a bunch of stuff. This is kind of our manifest that was changed, right? That's what this was done. We also have some required device capabilities. We had anything else that we change inside of our manifest gets propagated here in our property list, right? And if you actually open this up, this is an XML file, right? But this is not where we're storing stuff, not yet. We haven't stored anything yet. Okay, cool. So that's the one. Now we need some kind of file to hold everything. I'm going to right-click on my folder again, and I'm going to add a new file again. We're going to do this a bunch of times, so please watch carefully because you're going to have to do it on your own, right? I'm going to add this time, instead of a Swift file, I'm going to add a Cocoa Touch file and click Next. Cool. Instead of UI table view controller, which is not what we want to kind of go down here until we see a UI navigation controller, right? You can actually type it in as well. UI navigation controller. That's the one I want. And I want to call this the root, right? And what do they call it? The root view controller. Root view controller. I did it right. Yay. I don't want this checked. So if you have this checked for whatever reason, also create a zib file. It's actually a nib file. That's how they pronounce it. The old way of doing a storyboard, right? You don't want this checked. And you definitely want your Swift to be your language, not Objective-C for this example. Okay, click Next. And what this does is it's going to store this new file inside of your application. I'm going to bring this file a little higher. I'm just moving it around so we can see it higher up, right? So I've got my app delegate, my main storyboard, and my view controller. I'm going to get rid of some of the comments here because I don't need them right now. Notice that there's a bunch of stuff in here. Oh my God. Like tons and tons of stuff. I did receive memory warning and some other comments here. So I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff. It's like a ton of stuff that we're going to see in a second. So get rid of all this. I think I did it right. Did I do it right? I did not do it right. Let's kill that and try it again. It's not the right type. It's not a navigation controller. We need a UI table view controller. I knew that was wrong. I was looking at it going, no, there's not enough stuff here. There's not enough stuff here. Let's just kill it and try it again. So it's okay. It's good. It's good practice. Let's try again. Right click. I'll be okay. New file, Cocoa Touch class, right? And instead of a UI navigation controller, it's a UI table view controller. UI table view controller. That's what we wanted. And this is going to be, instead of table view, we're going to call it root view. And click Next. And we'll bring that up again up here. Sorry, that was weird. That was me overthinking. I did too much work there. Shouldn't have done that work. Okay, there we go. You see there's a lot of stuff in here, and we want to get rid of it. All this stuff. That's why I said there's like a bunch of sections. Let's get rid of all this stuff, all the way to the bottom. So it looks like this. The only thing I actually changed was instead of using a navigation controller, I'm using a UI table view controller. That's the difference. I could have just erased the name and typed it in, but I figured I want to show you the right way. All right, so that's what you have. Now the file we got to add. We have to do a little bit of typing. Now, the stuff actually you saw, if you actually saw that a bunch of long list of comments and stuff, that included some default functions that we could add in later on if we wanted to accept some of the stuff that comes with our UI table view controller. All right. All right. So we want to add this stuff, which is basically some private variables. Again, that's why I don't want to type this all out for you. Eventually, I want you guys to get to it, but this first one we need to do together, right? So notice that there are a bunch of private variables. One is called family names, which is explicitly unwrapping an array of strings, right? So private var. So that means just in case, we're going to say private var, right? Family names. Did I make it yeah, it's lowercase, of course. Family names, which is a string. And they're explicitly unwrapping it at the end. That's the first one. Family name. So the font family name, that's what that is, right? And then cell point size is a type CG float. We talked about this. So some kind of point. It's a point, right? So that's called cell point size. All right. So private var cell point size, which is of type CG float. We'll talk about more about CG stuff. That's computer graphics float, floating point variable. That's what it stands for. And the next one is a favorites list. We're going to have the Canadian spelling of types capital F favorites list explicitly unwrapped, right? That is a reference to our data, right? So favorites list, right, which is equal to, which is of type favorites list explicitly unwrapped. That's of our custom type. This is our class we wrote just now, right? So cell point size and favorites list. And then we got a couple more, but they're private statics, which means they're going to remember family cell and favorite cell, which is going to be family name and favorites. So family cell and favorite cell, family name and favorites. So two private statics. Private static, family cell. Okay. Family cell is equal to family name. Okay. And favorite cell is equal to favorites. I'm not wrong. I don't believe you have to explicitly, oh, it's with a capital F in this particular case. And I don't believe you have to explicitly unwrap these or implicitly unwrap them because we're going to declare them later. Did I do it wrong? I did. Oh, no. No. Oh, yeah, static let. I'll be okay. Because it can't be just statics. Hello. Hello, C++. I've been doing too much of that lately. Right? You don't use lets in C++. You do have private statics, and you put the type in the front, right? All right, so that's good. So these are our, again, private instance of variables. That's what they are. They're only available inside of our class, right? Inside the root view controller class. That's what they are. They're just storage entities. All right. Go to the next part. This is the view did load. We have to modify our view did load a little bit. Just make it a little bit smaller so you guys can see it all. So we do some initialization. Remember that the view did load takes the place of kind of an init function for our view, our UI view. Any view when the view loads, this triggers, right? So we're going to say family names font.family names. That's interesting. As a string, we're going to cast it as a string, and we're going to sort it. Sort the actual the list we're going to get. So again, family names. Notice family names is a string array, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to say family names, right, is equal to a UI font. I'll be okay. Dot family names object as a string array. That's what it. And we're going to make sure that we get it in a sorted order. That's what sorted does. So we're saying, hey, family names. Okay, now I love this. Did I do it wrong? Family names. I did. Family names. Okay. Whenever I get errors, I'm like, all right, I have an error. Cool. I can figure it out. This is interesting too. It says UI font family names, UI font dot family names, right? As a string, let's make sure it's correct, dot sorted. And it says cannot call value of non-function type string. Okay, this book, 2017, code, no working, right? What do? You use the Google gods. That's what you do, right? So that's what we're going to have to do in a second. Did I make a mistake? I'm just checking my code to make sure it's not incorrect. And again, I'm family names is of type string, which we are unwrapping. We've done that, right? Let's continue. We'll fix the error in a second. If you want to see fix, it says cannot call value of 9 type string, and then it replaced with this. Okay, let's see if I've done something wrong. Oh yeah, that's good. I did make a mistake. That's me, not the book. All right. Let preferred table view font. Huh? I know it's me. That's what I'm saying. It's me. See, as I didn't put it as it equals or is or something else. I did this. This is how it is in the book. Yeah, that's how it is in the book. But what it's saying here is replace like this, right? Hey, I don't know if this is correct, right? We're going to find out later when we try and run it, right? Let preferred table view font equals 2. So we're going to say let preferred table view font. This along lines, we're going to break it down, is over the 2 lines. So equals to UI font. So we can split it up. Preferred font. And there are 2 overloads. The one we want is for textile only. So preferred font for textile. This is the one. And we're going to put in our UI font textile in there, which we're going to, so for textile, UI font textile headline. UI font textile headline. Text style. It should be a, huh? Is it? Yeah, there's missing a dot, eh? Try that dot. UI font. No. Oh, yeah. No, but that's subheadline. No. That's not what they want. They want UI font textile headline. That's going to be wrong, too. Yeah. Or there's no dot here. Mistake in the book. Okay, maybe it's my mistake. I don't know. Funny when we have a brand new book that's incorrect, but it happens. It's errata, right? Happens on anytime you write something. So cell point size, we're going to set our cell point size to our preferred table view font point size. And then our favorites list to the shared favorites list. Favorites list to shared. Favorite list dot share favorite list. So our favorite list. This is the class favorites list dot shared. And why doesn't it come up? Favorites list dot. Did we not make it? Oh, we didn't use the capital. Favorites list. This one. Dot shared favorites list. There we go. That's going to basically assign the shared favorite list from our class. Remember, we talked about this as a static value. We're going to share it so we can use it. And this is with that set modifier that we saw before earlier. That's what this one does. So we did this piece, and the last part is our table view dot estimated row height is equal to the cell point size. Let's see if we can do that. Dot estimated row height is equal to the cell point size, right? Yeah. All right, so that should be good. That should be what we did. There's a couple problems just to note. This one was a dot. Thank you for that. And this one somehow needed to be changed. We don't know if that's going to work because who knows, right? But we'll see how that works out. That's what this part is. Okay, almost there. I want to connect it now. All right, so we wiped out did receive memory warning. We wiped out all the view delegate and data source methods. That's what we did, right? And we need a couple of more things in this file. The first part is a list of all available fonts. And the second part is that each favorite contains only one entry that will take us to the list of our favorite fonts. We don't have that set up yet, but we're going to do that. Okay, so there's two parts to the file. All right, and we have to put this new function before, and remember what this is view will appear. So before the view loads, we almost do a prep step with view will appear. It's another event handler for the application lifecycle, right? So we have view did load, but before that we have view did appear, and sometimes or view will appear. And sometimes we use this to say when we reload the view, let's say we're coming back from a segue, we're coming back from somewhere else, it's going to appear again. It's already loaded. It's already been set up somewhere, right? Remember on the stack we talked about before, we load it, we park it, and then when we pop the new view off the stack, we put it back. So it's not loading, it's just appearing. And this is why we have to put this in there. So view will appear. Usually I like to put that before view did load, right? Over here, and it's an override, right? Because it's part of our view will appear. View will appear. This one, right? And what we're going to put in there is we're going to call the super class, and we're going to pass an animated. So super dot view will appear. Okay, we're going to call that, and then we're going to say our table view reload data. So table view dot reload data. And now why? Remember I told you why we did this? Because as I said, this is animated. As I said, so we call this one the first time that loads. So when this event, application event, triggers the first time the application is loaded. That's what this one does, right? But this one triggers every time the view is, the application is seen again. That scene is seen again. So this application event triggers every time the view is rendered, or is going to be rendered. It's going to be rendered. So before the view is rendered, it's going to load up the data in the table view and then display it, if there's any data to load. Okay? For the application lifecycle, it starts off, we load up we initialize our application, and as it progresses, some of these default handlers get triggered, which allows us to do different things in there, right? Remember we talked about this as we're learning Swift, or we're learning just-in-time Swift. We only need the Swift to make this application run. Just like you're learning Java, if you haven't done Java before in Android, if you've never done Java, but it's not really Java, it's Java for Android. And hopefully you're learning Kotlin, because Kotlin is the new hot language these days, right? All right. So that's what these two things do. And I think we're almost ready to go with our first part, and I'll let you go for the second part, but let's make sure. I think we still have to connect everything. Oh, yeah. All right, so we might make another middle method because this we want to actually display the font, right? How about that? Oh, yeah, and this is interesting because we're using this NS index path. Remember NS. NS is not bad. That's not dirty. It just means next step. It comes from the old foundation class. And what we want to do is we want to put this on its own inside of our class. So we're going to make a new function called font for display, whatever that is. At the index path, we're going to pass in the index path here. And we're going to return, that's what this arrow means. We're going to return a UI font that's going to be displayed. Okay? So that's what's going to be down here. It's a utility method. So this is utility methods. One of them is called func. I'm going to just make some spaces here just so that you can see a little higher. Not because we need extra spaces, right? Font for display. And we're going to take in at index path, at index path, with a lowercase I, thank you. And also, oh yeah. Did I do it wrong? Oh yeah, I did it wrong. I meant to do this, right? NS index path, NS index path. Yes, we're getting an index path from here, and we're going to return, right, a UI font. Right, UI font unwrapped, implicitly unwrapped. Oh no, implicitly unwrapped. Sorry, implicitly unwrapped. Cool. Now the reason why it's giving us an error is because there's no return yet. We haven't written it anything. Whenever we return something, this is the return statement. This is the type, the signature part of the signature of our function, and we use the arrow to indicate what we're returning. Right, that's the Swift syntax. Right? And we're going to say if index path dot section is equal to 0. So if there's nothing inside the section, we're going to fill it up. So if index path dot section is equal to 0, right? Notice there's no brackets. That's the Swift way. And what are we going to do? We're going to let our family name is equal to family names index path row. Let family name is equal to our family names. And index path dot row. We're gonna reference the family name of the font that we got, right? That's what we're gonna do here. Okay, and it's an immutable array, and then we'll let the font name is equal to the UI font dot font names. Big thing, font name is equal to UI font dot font names, and then for family name, if I'm not wrong. Yep, family name dot first. What's the first? It finds the first appearance of that font inside the family name, so you don't get more if there's the duplicates for whatever reason. Right, that's what this one does. And then return is our return statement. Font name, right? Well, here we go again. If it's not equal to nil, then here's our ternary operator, right? And we're going to say it's going to return a UI font. This one, right? UI font and dot font names. Sorry, let me see. Yeah, UI font name. There we go. UI font. Yep, name and then font name. I love this. Name, font name. With our, too bad it didn't give me any kind of code hinting on this one. Our size of cell point size. Cell point size. That's if it's true. If it's nil. If it's not equal to nil. However, if it's equal to nil, that should be a colon. If it's equal to nil, just return nothing. I'm not going to return anything. So this basically says, look, if we find a font name size return, how about this? Return. You like that? You like the return? That's a Greek thing, right? I'm joking. I'm joking. Just because I'm a Greek guy. Return font name not equal to nil. So we're checking. This is the condition. If it's not equal to nil, then load a font name, right? Otherwise, load nil. And it says value of optional type. Do I need something somewhere? Yes, I do. I need this one. This is an optional type. That'll take away the error. And again, you know, sometimes that's the biggest pain in the ass for writing Swift. I'll be honest with you, the whole implicitly unwrap thing. Again, it's to take care of null pointer errors. That's what it does, or null reference errors, right? So it says, hey, we don't know if we're going to get anything missing return in a function expected to return UI font. Not equal to nil, UI font, right? Name is font name, size, subpoint size, or return nil. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Else, because what if this what if this doesn't happen? Right? Return nil, if I'm not wrong, yeah? Because what if this isn't true? What if the index path section is not equal to 0? That's not true, right? And if it's not true, we want to go to this else statement, so that means it's going to return nil. Okay. So remember why we did this. So we implemented this utility method for within the class. We'll be configuring the table view, like it says, via its data source methods. And you'll need to be able to figure out which font you want to display in each cell. That's what this does. Wow. That's why I'm telling you that this whole part is the biggest part, right? So it's the longest part. We're almost done, I swear. And then we're going to let you do your thing, because there's more stuff than this. This is like pages and pages of adding view controllers and setting things up and all this stuff. Okay, so this is one. We erased it, but we're going to put it back. Override our func number of sections. Okay, so we'll do this first. So this is the data source methods. We've erased them, right? But we're going to do this primary code stuff in our table view data source methods. So this is down in here. And underneath this one, we're going to say our data source methods. And one of them is this. I'm going to kind of step into this thing so I can put this up a little higher for you guys to see. Is this override function number of sections in table view. So override number of sections in table view, this one, the first one. Number in sections of table view. All right, and it's returning an integer. That's what it does. And when we want to return, and this is funky again, it's going to basically say, hey, check to see if our favorites list dot favorites is empty. Is it empty? Yes, return one section. If it's not empty, return two sections. So this is kind of a ternary operator, which is kind of a neat use of this thing. Return favorites lists dot favorites, right? Dot is empty. If that's true, then return one. If it's not true, then return two. But two, number of sections. That's the number of sections we have inside of our view. Okay. So that's one of them. I think we have two more. So this is the first section. This is the second section. If we're going to override this table view, and then we want to do for the function table view for table view UI table view number of rows in section. Okay, that's what we want. So override table view, and then number of rows in section. We want to kind of look down here. Here's number of rows in section, this one. Okay. We don't have to type this out. And this is the one. And what we're going to return is the number of rows in the section. And again, we're going to do the same check. If its section is equal to 0, then return family names.count, right? Otherwise, return 1. So again, it's section it's equal to 0. Family names.counts. Otherwise, return 1. So what this means is, okay, we don't have anything there yet, right? So we're going to return the number of rows equal to the family names. That's how many sections, that's how many rows we're going to have. Otherwise, if we don't have anything, right? If this is true, we're only going to return 1 row because it's going to be empty. There's nothing there yet, right? That's what we're saying. But we haven't loaded something. So again, this is type safe because what if, for whatever reason, we can't load our family names, which we might have a problem with because of that one piece of code in our list, right? All right, let's take a look. We don't know. We're going to go back to this. We've done these two. I think there's one more. Yep. This is all set up. And this is override table view title for header in section. So override on table view. I'm going to say title for header in section, this one. All right. Title for footer. No, that's not right. La la la. Table view. Yeah, table for header in section, not footer. Header in section. This is the one. I don't know how I got the footer there. I must have clicked the wrong thing. Title for header in section. And then when we do that, we're going to return again if section is 0, right? Return. If our section is 0 sections, there's no section, then we're going to say the title is all font families. All font families. That's the title that's going to appear. Otherwise, it's going to say my favorite fonts. Why is this? Because this is also going to propagate to the other subviews. But just in case there's only one section or there's more than one section, which we'll have if we have a different, depending on where this root controller goes. So sometimes what will happen is this root controller is going to pop in another subview, and the subview is going to have multiple sections because we're going to add some fonts. And other times we're just going to have one big section of fonts. And that's why this check is working. So it can work with all subviews that we load. Oof, crazy, right? Remember, Android, easy. iOS, crazy. Right? Because of all these things you need to know. Now, all this stuff, with all respect and with a little bit of an apology towards Apple here, the documentation for this is up on the Apple site. It's very well documented. That's one thing. If you had a problem and if it gave you an error and you didn't know what to do, you could probably figure out by looking things on the Apple website. Believe it or not, it has a whole list of examples and stuff like that, right? But it's good to have a book to help to follow as well, to kind of give a pattern. And these things that I've been showing you with the books help. Is patterns of how to create basic things, right? Once you know that you can do it. A friend of mine, maybe I've told you guys this before, when I work with the developer, one of his thoughts was, hey, you don't know what you don't know. I think I've told you this before, right? That means if you don't know that it's possible, you don't know what to search for. And if you don't know what to search for, then Google is useless, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So at least now you know it's possible to do this. So then you, in your mind, you know what to search for. Hey, I did that before. I don't know how to do it. This is how you do it because you know how to do it. You've seen it before. All right, I think that's it. No. That's one more, I guess. How about we take a short break? Because otherwise, if I don't take a short break, I'm going to go nuts, right? I don't know about you. I keep typing code. But this is all, stuff. It's halfway through. We're still halfway through, right? So let's take a small break. And when we come back, we'll type this out. I'll have it typed out for you. And we'll go through it.